Oke, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 10 with the members Army, Shafira, Aulia, Libertin, and Eli Widianti. Here we will present about our material with the title is Attitude Assessment Development of the Mathematics Learning Assessment course. Okay, next. The first is we talk about the definition of attitude. Attitude is a feeling related to a person's tendency to respond to something or object. Attitude is also an expression of the values or outlook on life that a person has. Next. The next is we talk about the definition of attitude assessment. Assessment of attitude is a series of activities designed to measure the attitude of learners as a result of learning programs. Attitude assessment is also the application of a standard or decision-making system to attitude. The result of the assessment can be in the form of qualitative values or narrative statement in words and quantitative values in the form of numbers. The next is the main use of the attitude assessment as a part of learning is a reflection of understanding and progress of individuals' learner attitudes. The next is learning dimension. According to Marzano and Pickering 1997, in Avandi and Sajian 2017 in page 117 until 118, there are 5 dimensions of learning as follows. The first is attitude and perception. In this part, the teacher helping students to develop a positive attitude and perception about the learning climate in the classroom. The second is acquired and integrate knowledge. In this part, teacher helping students acquire declarative knowledge. The third is expand and refine knowledge. In this part, teacher helping students develop complex reasoning process. And then use knowledge meaningfully. In this part, teacher helping students develop complex reasoning process. And the last is thinking behavior. In this part, teacher helping students develop productive thinking behavior and encourage the behavioral dimension of thinking. Next. Okay, the next is attitude assessment coverage. The implementation of attitude assessment is intended to determine the tendency of students' spiritual and social behavior in everyday life, both inside and outside the classroom as a result of education. The 2013 curriculum divides attitude competencies into two, namely, first is spiritual attitude. Spiritual attitude is related to the formation of students who are faithful and pious. Spiritual attitude as the manifestation of vertical interaction with God Almighty. The scope of the spiritual attitude is appreciating and living the teaching of the religion adopted. The second is social attitude. The social attitude related to the formation of students who have noble character. They are independent, democratic, responsible, and so on. Social attitude as a manifestation of the existence of consciousness in an effort to realize the harmony of life. Scope of social attitude namely harness, discipline, responsibility, cooperation, tolerance, peace, polite, responsiveness, and confidence. Next. The next is we talk about technique and forms of attitude assessment. There are several instruments used to measure behavior and personality in school, including first, behavioral rating scale, the second is attitude assessment, and the third is self-assessment. For the first, we talk about the behavior rating scale. Behavioral rating scale is a list of statements that ask informants, that is, in this case is parent or teacher, about the condition of a child and certain dimension. This is the example of instruction used to inform about the child with the following criteria. 0 is rare or never, 1 is described usually or sometimes, and 2 is described often. And the statement, some example of statement is first lie, second is active discussion in the classroom, and the third is hard to focus. Next. The next is attitude assessment. There are some techniques of attitude assessment. This includes first, observation. Observation assessment technique can use instrument in the form of observation sheet or journal books. The observation sheet is an instrument that can be used by educators to facilitate the preparation of reports on observation of student behavior related to spiritual attitude, social attitude. This is the example. There are some aspects of attitude assessment, such as first, task commitment, second is cooperation, third is accuracy, and the fourth is interest. And in the table, we also have total score. Next. The next is about peer assessment. Peer assessment is an assessment technique carried by the student or evaluator of student in group. This is the example of the peer assessment. The description of what is being by assessed. The first is the attitude of student in accepting the opinions of others. The second is attitude of student in accepting critics. And this is the instruction how to rate. The first is give a number 2 if you feel good, number 1 if it is enough, and number 0 if it is bad. And add up all the values that have been given. Okay, and the next is direct equation. This is the attitude can be also measured through direct question or interviews. This is the example. There are statement and description of the attitude assessment, such as very agree, neutral, and not agree. Okay, and the next will be explained by Eli. Please, Eli.
Okay, thank you, Shafira. I will continue for the third, self-assessment. Self-assessment is an instrument viewed by a person to describe his personal experience, including emotional, motivational, interpersonal, and attitude characteristics. And the next is indicator formulation and the example. Indicator spiritual attitude is appreciate the teaching of the religion adapted. For the example of the indicator, there are pray before and after doing something, perform worship on time, and greet at the beginning and the end of the presentation according to the region. And next is indicator social attitude. There are many social attitudes, but in here we just talk about honest and discipline. Honest, trustworthy, behavior in word, action, and work. For the example of indicator, don't cheat on exam or test, no plagiarism, and handing over to the authorities the item form. And the discipline is action that demonstrate orderly behavior and comply with various provision and regulation. For the example of indicators, they arrive on time and obey the rules or rules together on school. Next is implementation of attitude assessment. The attitude assessment is carried by subject teacher during the learning process and outside of learning hours, counseling guidance teacher, and homeroom teacher, as long as students are outside class hours. Assessment of spiritual and social attitude is carried continuously for 1 semester. And next is processing of attitude assessment. There are steps to make a description of grade or attitude development for one semester. First, each teacher grouping the attitude notes in the journal they make into spiritual attitude and social attitude. Second, each teacher formulates a brief description of spiritual attitude and social attitude based on journal notes for each student. Third, teacher collect a brief description of the attitude of the subject teacher and counseling teacher. And the fourth, reporting the result of the attitude assessment in the form of predicates and description. And then the utilization and follow-up of the attitude assessment. The behavior of spiritual and social attitude, they are observed and recorded in the journal of teacher must be the basis of the implementation of follow-up by the school. If the behavior is not included in spiritual attitude or social attitude, follow-up in the form of coaching for students can be arrived out by all educators in school. Okay, I think that's all. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.